Alrighty, I'm back here in the studio 2 weeks after starting the first segment in this BC Liner series right over here, and I've now made a full circle and starting this final segment on the BC Liner using etiquette and tips and tricks for the best results. These are things that I have seen clinically used over the past few years, and I just wanted to share with you some of my tips and tricks. So far, we've talked about the top 7 uses of the BC Liner, and to recap, keep in mind that this material is a bioactive hydrophilic resin ionomer, having microfilled resin and incorporated rubberized resins. This combination helps with a smooth finished surface and modulus of elasticity, resisting shear fractures, which is an important thing and specifically useful in cases where you're having those transcrestal cervical root repairs where you want to have a surface that is not going to collect plaque. Now, the material uses syringe delivery and mixing tips, and therefore it should require some specific etiquette for proper use. Dual barrel mixing is one of the most common delivery methods of dental materials, but for anyone out there who's not familiar with them, now just keep in mind that all dual barrel mixing materials should be bled through the syringe before placing the mixing tip on. And by disposing a small amount of the material before applying this mixing tip, what you're doing is you're ensuring that you have the same amount of catalyst and base coming out of the syringe when you press the plunger and are getting exact mixing proportions. Sometimes one of the barrels may be clogged or sinuous, and unless you check this step, you may get an improper mix. You should also know that you have 2 mixing tips for this material. There's a short mixing tip with an adjustable metal nozzle that comes with the material inside the kit, and there's also an optional longer mixing tip. The metal nozzle allows great flexibility for precise application in all kinds of angles. The shorter mixing tip is designed for less waste and only for applications where you need to use the material as an actual liner with a thickness of about 1 or 2 millimeters. This is the tip that's included with the BC Liner. But if you need a bulk fill for a longer term provisional, you should use a longer tip to avoid any voids that could potentially build up from the shorter mixing tip when you're having several millimeters of the material bulk filled into the axis. So this is an important distinction for having a homogeneous mix. Use a longer tip if you're getting too many voids in your bulk fills. That's a good tip. It's also a good idea to discard a small amount of the first mixed material that comes out of the syringe before placing it in the tooth. Okay? Again, this is just to make sure that any inconsistencies in the mix are discarded. And this step is universally true for all dual barrel mixing materials that come out of a mixing tip. If you're using the material as a mirror liner or over the RRM and putty as a lid technique, then you don't really need to use a bonding agent. But if you're using it as a long-term provisional, you may consider using an etch, phosphoric acid etch, and a bonding agent. That would be helpful, and it will definitely increase the retentive and the sealing capacity of this material. This really has to do with how long you plan on keeping the material in. If you're filling it and will later drill into the material and use it as a base, then bonding agents are probably not necessary. You need to use your judgment on any given case. For example, if you have a very calcified, dystrophically calcified tooth, it may not be a bad idea to place a little bit of etching for like 6 to 10 seconds, etchant on the focal floor or on the sides before you place the material. Also, placing a little bit of a bevel on your cavo surface areas, or maybe putting a little bit of extra etchant on the enamel would be also very helpful for improving your seal in those long-term provisionals. A key point is to inject the material over the putty and extend the liner into the clean dentin. Now you should also wait for a good 25 to 45 seconds for the self-etching and bonding of the material to work on the dentin enamel before you're light curing it. Use a low-power curing light in this step. Now, there is nothing worse than placing any dual cure material on a dentin and then zapping it immediately with light. You will get tremendous amount of shrinkage and very likely a very weak bond unless you're using a bonding agent. Some time is necessary for the self-etching and bonding to take place before the material is polymerized. I recommend at least waiting at the very least about 30 seconds or so, 30 to 45 seconds ideally. And the final set for this material without the light is about 3.5 minutes at body temperature. So place the material and then wait a little bit for the self-setting, then light cure it. Also keep in mind that the light from your microscope or from your headlight can potentially set this material or begin an initial quick set right from the mixing barrel as the material is coming out. So it's very important to use an orange filter. You could, if your microscope has an orange filter, if your light has from your headlight has an orange filter, make sure you apply it. If you don't, you can get these disposable orange filters from your supplier. And if you're going to use it with the scope, make sure that your assistant presses it up against the scope very quickly. And in fact, because of the fact that this doesn't go in touch with the patient's body, you could use them multiple times. When bulk filling for provisional applications, I generally bulk fill up to the cable surface preparation, wait about 45 seconds, then I shine a short burst of light, only about 1 or 2 seconds, to solidify the surface of this material and allow the rest of it to self-set. That will give me the least amount of polymerization shrinkage. Once the surface is set, I can take the rubber dam off and then take my final x-ray and chat with the patient and know that the material is now set after 3 minutes, then check the bite and make sure that the bite is okay before I let the patient go. Keep in mind that the material will set very hard and it's ready to chew on, and like CABIT where you have to wait for about an hour before somebody chews on it, this would be ready to go. So you have to make sure that the bite is okay before the patient leaves, so you don't want to have a patient in hyperocclusion right after the root canal has been done. One little trick is to, in fact, just kind of put a little bit here on the piece of paper like this and have your assistant mix it with a spatula like that, and then have the other side of this particular instrument here to pick up a little bit, and now you can apply this specifically to the place that you want to put it on. So this is for smaller applications. If you just want to fill in and kind of close this seam or improve your seal in some smaller places. Keep these basic principles in mind and you'll be able to get the most out of this material and the techniques that I've described for its use. The non-surgical lit technique is a great technique that is using a pure bioceramic that has the most biocompatibility against the PDL and the pulp cells, and then you're placing this material right on top of it to cover it as a lid, and allows time for the setting of the bioceramic while it's allowing you to continue to work and have the convenience of proceeding without having to wait for a second visit. Now, this combination gives you the most possible biocompatibility and clinical efficiency. So a syringe of the BC liner and BC putty makes for a great perforation repair kit that every clinician doing root canal therapy or pulp capping should have chairside. I look forward to seeing your cases and using the non-surgical lit technique on the internet or around town. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment below this video, and also share your cases using this technique and tag me for any feedback. I'd love to see the cases that you do. For Real World Endo, I hope you enjoyed this series of videos on BC Liner. I'm Ali Nasseh, and let's save some teeth.